started.
Yeah, they're all joining us now. We have Biswajit.
Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and get ourselves started. So anyway, uh, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Carl Truman, and I am the president of the Rotary Action Group for Community Economic Development. And today, of course, is April 24th, 2024. And we're pleased to welcome all of you to the fourth in a series of 5 webinars on microfinance and related topics. So today, that's my slide here. Today, we're focused on microfinance in Africa and Asia. And we have 3 speakers joining us. But first, before we do that, I want to provide a little background to the Rotary Action Group for Community Economic Development, in particular, for those of you who are joining us either for the first time or only have a vague understanding of what we do. So the Rotary Action Group, as we say, is a source of knowledge and expertise helping Rotarians plan, implement, manage impactful, and in particular, sustainable economic development projects, creating lasting change in poor and underserved communities.
You can just click on the screen.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. A lot of the work that we do is related to the nation's sustainable development goals. And in particular, we're focused on goal number 1, which is the elimination of poverty in forms, all forms, everywhere. Just a moment. Gomati, can you handle the admission of people in?
I'm doing it, Prof. Yes.
You are? Okay, great. All right, that's great. So that being our overarching objective, the elimination of poverty, how do we do it? Our focus in this particular Rotary Action Group is to concentrate on growing local economies. And we're doing it really in the following ways. First, by helping local entrepreneurs and community leaders, especially women in many of these communities, to help them advance. And we're focused on providing training and hopefully resulting in well-paying jobs and access to capital in financial institutions. And we're doing this through our work with the Rotary Foundation, Rotarians, and other organizations. And our work is really focused in 5 broad areas. The first is in vocational training and scholarships. A second, agricultural development. A third, enterprise development. A fourth, in providing finance of various sorts. And finally, a program called Adopt a Village, where literally a Rotary club or group of clubs will adopt a town or village and try to cover various aspects of development for them. Our work really is built upon 6 different pillars. And these are assessment, education, capital, mentoring, networking, and evaluation. So broadly speaking, it's helping develop needs assessments, providing education to those who seek our services, helping provide access to capital, providing mentoring to those who are working with, using our worldwide network to try and to connect people, those in need, with those who might have relevant information, and finally, in evaluation of projects, covering all of these different areas. And ultimately, we do it in the following 9 areas, by providing expert advice, doing needs assessment, for example, on global grant projects, helping those find partners for the projects they're doing, offering case studies to those interested in learning more of what's been done already. Funding sources, clearly a very important area that we work in. Training and education, sharing best practices, doing community outreach, and finally in project evaluation. So Ragced is, as I say, a worldwide network of people focused on economic development in each of these different areas. And we can provide you, your Rotary Club or Rotaract Club, or others connected with you with these different services to help you do more effective projects that are going to result ultimately in what we talked about before, building local economies and helping achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 1. And for some reason, I'm having trouble advancing my slide. There we are. So as I said, this is a series of 5 webinars, and this is number 4. Just to remind you, our 5th and final session will be held on May 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time in the US and Canada. And we hope that you'll both find this session beneficial and also that you'll attend session number 5. So our objectives today are to really talk about different types of microfinance models and projects. And today we're going to really focus on Africa and Asia. So we hope to cover in each one of in those geographic areas in a way that we really haven't been doing prior to this point in time. So hopefully has Helene joined us? Oh, yes.
Helene's online.
There you are. Okay. So Helene Dudley lives in Miami, Florida in the United States. She is the founder and president of an organization called TCP Global. And the thing that's particularly notable is she's both a Rotarian, but she has been, she's an alumna of the U.S. Peace Corps, actually did not 1, but 2 different stints with the Peace Corps, one in Colombia and the other in Slovakia. And since has taken what she's learned in that to get involved in different forms of microfinance, particularly in Africa. So at this point, I wanted to turn the meeting over to Helene, and I'm going to stop my share and let you be able to do it. So Helene, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Let me see if I can show this as a slideshow.
Real quickly, is one point I want to make is we're going to have 3 different speakers. We'll have a question and answer session afterwards. So along the way, as you have questions, please put them in the chat box. And we'll look forward to answering them when the 3 speakers are done. Go ahead, Helene.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Okay, so TCP Global differs from other loan programs in several important ways. Small loans in rural communities. Our model works best where the major microfinance programs struggle. We specialize in loans averaging $200 in very remote sites. Sustainable loan pools. With others, when the office closes, programs end. If we someday disappear, our loan funds can continue to circulate to serve marginalized entrepreneurs. In many cases, the borrowers themselves manage the loan pools. Zero overhead. Partners are paid nothing upfront to run the program, allowing 100% of funds sent overseas to be distributed as microloans. Partners are compensated instead for good results. The opportunity to earn up to $2,500 per year running a small loan program is a bonanza to partners in small communities. Intentionality is important. At microcredit summits, Dr. Mohammed Yunus repeatedly reminded attendees that when we try to mix the profit and the social motives, profit tends to win. Our model attracts partners whose overriding goal is helping people get ahead, keeping the focus on the borrower. In our model, when the borrower succeeds, we all succeed. Our model keeps the focus on borrower success, not on bottom line concerns about volume and return on investment. To achieve this, it is essential that everyone gains from the borrower's success, particularly the partner running the program on the ground. The grassroots partner or fiscal agent is compensated for good results by allowing them to withdraw up to 50% of funds previously received after they are invested twice in loans. Hence, it takes $9,000 to build a permanent loan pool of $4,500, with the partner earning $4,500 over time. When the borrowers succeed, TCP Global also gets good stats with which to attract more donors. We also foster sound money management. I believe that when people spend their own money, they are thrifty and they spend wisely. When they apply for grant funds, not so much. By allowing sites to earn money to spend as they see fit for their self-identified priorities, we also eliminate the considerable time and energy involved in applying for, approving, and reporting on grants. And lastly, follow the money. Rotary likes Rotarians to keep track of microloan funds, and so do we. Reports from the field allow us to keep track of every dollar sent, every loan issued, and every payment received, thanks to recent automations of our reporting processes. Okay, I can't advance mine either. Okay, here we go. Other things you might want to know are that we started in 2000 in Colombia as the Columbia Project, and since evolving as TCP Global in 2015, the $1.3 million provided for these loan pools has funded over $5.7 million in loans, thanks to an excellent repayment rate of 98.8%. All 6 of our board members are returned Peace Corps volunteers, and 4 are also Rotarians. Only the system architect is paid, although way below market rates. We are currently working hard to get both Peace Corps and Rotary to help us expand our reach. We manage with low overhead because reports from the field are processed with no human intervention in the United States. And we only accept sites that are recommended by a trusted source, like a Rotarian or returned Peace Corps volunteer, or an existing loan partner. Rather than spend time, money, and energy to vet them, we trust and then verify. During the first 24 years, when we still provided $1,500 to open a loan site, we were only burned twice by people who took the money and ran. That $3,000 was a painful loss, but only a fraction of what it would have cost to set up a vetting system, which likely would not have avoided these 2 disappointments, which one was a Rotarian and one was a Peace Corps volunteer counterpart. We visit when we can, and we verify through our reports. When reports came from one site in Uganda revealed they were charging over 15% monthly interest, we closed them immediately. Since they had provided the first $1,500, we did not suffer any loss. They justified their rate by saying that was what the MFI, Microfinance Institute in the area, charged. Later, a site serving pygmies in Rwanda was spoiled by too many giveaway programs. It could not fathom the idea of repaying loans. We had to close them too, but again, without a loss of any funds. So a small investment in entrepreneurial women or men is the investment that keeps on giving. The gray bar is money provided to fund the program, and the much larger middle bar is the value of loans supported by repayments every year, repayments that are immediately reinvested in new loans. On average, all donations are matched annually. So savvy Rotarians who like to leverage Rotary District and RI matches should also consider the 100% annual match available through TCP Global by investing in VSLAs, which I will talk about later. Distributing the money is one thing, but getting it into the right hands is also very important. TCP Global partners who run the loan programs are already working in the community. They know the community well, and the community knows them. They don't give loans to everyone, just to entrepreneurs they know and trust. Trusting their example will show the way for others. TCP Global loans are only for revenue-generating activities. Since entrepreneurs tend to be change makers, the ripple effects of investing in them bring seemingly unlimited results. So this graphic provides a quick overview of how our model works. As of 2021, groups must find the first 1,500 to invest. As payments come in, they immediately issue more loans, so that by month 5, the total value of loans is 3,000, or twice the original funds. Then we send 1,500 more, and we continue like this until they are fully funded. In the early days, we had trouble finding partners, even though we were ready to give them $1,500. Highly desirable partners hesitated to take responsibility for managing our funds, or they had been burned by programs that made promises too good to be true in the past. And the less desirable partners were completely turned off by the idea of earning money for good results rather than being paid upfront for good intentions. Now we have the opposite problem. After we added 70 new sites in 2021, since each site incurs a potential commitment of $9,000 from us, we sought to control expansion by requiring sites to provide the first 1,500. So then new sites dropped to 44 in 2022, then rose to 59 in 2023, and we've added 32 sites in the first 4 months of 2024. So fundraising to keep up with growth remains a challenge. So our original model was to find nonprofits already serving marginalized communities who already had salaries, rent, utilities covered, and thus incurred no significant expense in adding a small loan program for their clients. We provided funds to set up loan programs for their clients on the assumption that increased income made it easier for their clients to implement the nonprofit's primary mission, whether that be health, education, environmental protection, etc. Administering successful loan programs also provides earnings to support the primary mission of the nonprofit. The nonprofit keeps all the interest earnings in addition to the 50% they earn after funds are successfully invested twice. We still use the education, agricultural, health model, but in Africa, we adapted it to allow effective grassroots organization to serve as fiscal agents to connect TCP Global to Women's Village Savings and Loan Associations, or VSLAs. These are informal groups which typically lack international bank accounts and computer capabilities, making it a challenge for them to benefit from TCP Global funds. Since their limited savings only support small and infrequent loans, many VSLAs seek outside funds to increase their loan pools to support larger and more frequent loans, so the entrepreneurs can really make significant improvements in their small businesses. The VSLAs keep the interest earnings, while the fiscal agent then receives the 50% earnings. We now support more than 175 VSLAs in Africa, with fiscal agents like SADC in Uganda providing banking and reporting services. With VSLAs as the first step on the ladder out of poverty, TCP Global serves as the second step. In 2 of our largest sites, fiscal agents now use some of their 50% earnings to establish a loan pool to provide larger loans for the most successful borrowers. With the help of urban Rotarians, we hope to someday create a 4th step of affordable loans through banks in Africa. Our borrowers in Uganda have had bad experiences with banks, and they get very visibly upset when we recommend bank loans. But it doesn't have to be that way. This is an area where city Rotarians could help us in opening the pathway to affordable bank loans that will minimize the cost and risk to both borrowers and the banks. Since MFIs need to cover cost with loan interest, I do not see potential for affordable microloans in remote areas. There are also quick and easy loans available in Uganda, according to my internet research, but they charge 10% to 30% per month. TG, near the Uganda border with Sudan, is a real-life example of a fiscal agent VSLA program. All VSLA groups have deposits of member savings, which are typically returned to the members at the end of the year with interest. It is a question of using some of those funds to enroll in the TCP Global program. Fiscal agent sites make it easier for TCP Global with no paid staff to manage multiple program sites. Once a fiscal agent knows how to manage a program and send reports, It is no extra work other than fundraising for us in the US to add more sites through that fiscal agent. But for a fiscal agent in Uganda managing 59 sites and one in Niger managing 57, traveling by moto to gather report data and then transferring that information to our Excel report files is very time consuming. TG, for example, is 45 kilometers from the fiscal agent office, and in Niger, the sites are spread out all across the country. Our systems architect has a phone app ready to test in Uganda in May to allow VSLA leaders using a smartphone to enter the loan and payment information offline to a phone app and then upload to the TCP Global database when they connect. This will provide significant relief to the fiscal agents, allowing them to spend more time on mentoring and support rather than secretarial duties. The challenge will be to find enough people with smartphones or find a way to provide smartphones and chargers. Women are empowered and supported, and they gain strength in numbers through the VSLAs. I continue to learn valuable lessons from them. When they ordered their 1,000 t-shirts, all in different colors to distinguish the 33 groups, I was silently appalled. Their African dresses are beautiful, and the shirts seem a wasted expense for people, many of whom are living on under $3 a day. Then I saw the respect they gain in the community as a highly visible group and the solidarity they enjoy. For these women who frequently relate how gratifying it is to finally be respected and listened to in their communities, respect and recognition are powerful motivators. The shirts serve a valuable purpose, and I learned how important it is to defer to the judgment of trusted individuals much closer to the situation than myself. We sometimes fall into the trap of thinking the developed world must have a corner on wisdom. The more I interact with partners overseas, the more clear becomes the folly of this belief. Before receiving their first microloans, many borrowers in Yumbe, Uganda, reported they had experienced hunger in their homes and difficulty paying school fees. Within 4 months of their first loan, families enjoyed 3 meals a day and school fees were paid in full. They moved their businesses from mats in the street in the hot sun to covered market stalls or kiosks, and they hired helpers. Their incomes increased steadily, school fees got paid, and the family ate. And one woman shared that when she was delinquent in school fees, she did not feel entitled to speak up in parent meetings. But now, with fees paid in full, she found her voice. Almost immediately, the Yumbe groups felt the need to give back, which they said stemmed from their Muslim culture. They decided that forming a Rotary Club was the best way to do that. Their club was chartered on April 7th, 2022, the very same day that Ketanji Brown Jackson was confirmed as the first Black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. In my mind, a Rotary Club of market vendors and subsistence farmers is of equivalent historic note. The first time I heard them reference helping the less fortunate in one of their Rotary meetings, my eyes watered over. I have seen their living conditions. Many of them have to fetch water from a river or well, live with no electricity, often with no mattress, but they are confident in their ability to build a better life. It is still not clear to me if these are the most special women on the planet or the tip of the iceberg of potential change makers waiting to emerge from abject poverty. The Yumbe Rotarians began by cleaning around boreholes. Then they distributed water filters provided by an eWash Rotarian. Then they taught young men to make bricks and build latrines. Then they learned to make soap, drill wells, and test and treat for malaria. There is seemingly no task they are not prepared to take on. In early March, we completed our first annual survey in Yumbe, where we now have over 1,800 borrowers. 6 volunteers interviewed 145 randomly selected borrowers to learn how the loans had impacted their lives. It is interesting to note not only the progress, but the priorities that progress reflects. They invested in land to build permanent homes and plant crops, in animals that will multiply to provide income and sustenance in the future, in solid roofs to end the costly cycle of thatched roof repairs. A survey will be conducted in May of 171 borrowers in Niger, and there is interest in Sierra Leone in doing a survey as well. Improving businesses and increasing incomes is only the start. It's enlightening to see what borrowers do when they no longer need all their time and energy to find food for their families and pay school fees. So far, the Yumbe Rotarians have adopted 18 villages to improve access to clean water, test and treat for malaria, and install latrines, benefiting 18,000 people. They did not do it alone. They drew on the broader Rotary community for support. Members of the nearest Rotary Club 4 hours away in Arua helped them understand the ways of Rotary. Chris Roselle, an E-Wash Rotarian and a member of the TCP Global Board, has visited Yumbe multiple times, brought in experts to assist them in well drilling, provided technical equipment, and shared with them from his 40 years of experience studying development programs, identifying best practices, and implementing them on 3 continents. On April 17th, RI approved a grant of $118,000 for the Yumbe Rotarians to adopt 12 more villages for wash enhancements. The Yumbe Rotarians do the work on the ground, and they make the decisions, but they work smart, drawing on the wealth of knowledge and experience available through the Rotary network. They have dug 8 wells by hand at 1/8 the cost of traditional boreholes. Freed from abject poverty, people can build a better future for their families and their communities. By supporting economic development in rural areas, we help create a world in which economic migration can one day become a choice rather than a necessity. We have countless stories of men in Nepal who stopped migrating for menial work in India once their families received loans to raise goats, build hothouses, or raise chickens. As we saw above in the survey, until they have access to affordable credit, they cannot afford to invest in animals that will feed them better in the future when they need all their resources to survive today. I believe VSLAs represent a great opportunity for Rotary. Many of the more than 400,000 VSLAs worldwide that resulted from CARE's earlier efforts could evolve as Rotary Community Corps to ensure the sustainability of any local Rotary project. They could also serve as a link for urban Rotarians to support economic developments in remote rural areas. I bet that at least 5% of the Rotarians in Kampala and Kathmandu, in Niamey and Nairobi are from a rural area that lacks economic opportunity, primarily because marginalized entrepreneurs lack access to affordable loans. Rotary could solve that problem. Rotarians could bring affordable credit to their native villages by actively seeking ways to partner with and economically support VSLAs in their villages. We are very grateful for the Ragced 10,000 donation earlier this year to fund a pilot to hopefully open doors at Rotary for loan programs like ours, managed at the grassroots level by VSLAs rather than by professional microfinance institutions or MFIs. According to information available online, over 140 million borrowers received over 200 billion in microloans in 2023, mostly through MFIs. If we fail to look in the weeds, we could mistakenly assume the world has achieved microcredit goals. But as attendees at the Microcredit Summit in Merida learned, affordable credit fails to reach small and remote communities. MFIs must cover expenses with loan interest, and therefore they focus on population centers where both the volume of loans and individual loan amounts are the highest. That's where they work the best. Currently, Rotary requires that all their microloan programs be administered through an MFI. The $10,000 Ragced project will hopefully cause RI to reconsider. The online definition of a microloan is anything up to $50,000. A level Rotarian businessman would readily accept, but not a subsistence farmer or a vendor selling tomatoes in the market in a rural community. They need much smaller, manageable loans that are affordable. That is the population TCP Global reaches through the VSLAs. On the first day of my 2022 visit to Yumbe, a borrower volunteered that with loans from a well-respected MFI, she felt she was working for the MFI rather than her family. The interest MFIs charge in remote areas is simply too high. At that Merida summit, John Hatch, founder of the Finca Village Savings Groups, challenged MFIs at the conference to find some way to reach remote areas. It appears they answered his call and proved once again that we should always be very careful what we ask for. MFIs may work well in cities, but charge up to 15% monthly interest in rural areas for small loans. Yet these are the people we need to reach if we want to increase the world food supply and reduce economic migration. In Uganda, we are proposing a Yumbe challenge for urban Rotary clubs to adopt the village of one or more of their members. Phase 1 is to simply empower entrepreneurs in those Rotarian villages through VSLAs. Yumbe VSLAs told us what they needed was 2 loans of $300 each year to each of 30 members. That is a loan pool of $4,500. In this Yumbe challenge, we assume that urban Rotary clubs acting as fiscal agent would not take the 50% earnings. Thus, if 2 international Rotary clubs share cost with a host club, this would cost only $1,500 per club over a 1-year period. Some VSLAs will stop there, and that is fine. Others may be motivated, like the Yumbe VSLAs, to do more for their communities. The host club can then seek additional Rotary Club partners to help and can use Yumbe Global Grant 2237714 as a template for their own global grant for those villages. If this proposal succeeds in Uganda, we will work to replicate it globally. So there's little data, insufficient interest, no glory, and scarce funding for disaster prevention. Yet disaster prevention is where our greatest and most cost-effective opportunities exist. Rather than invest billions in famine relief and dealing with throngs of migrants at their borders, developed nations would see better results by investing instead in grassroots entrepreneurs who could help feed the world and create vibrant rural communities where young people would have an opportunity to achieve their dreams. Immense Missed Opportunities, IMO, published last fall, is my attempt to reach decision makers at Peace Corps, Rotary, USAID, CARE, and other foundations to encourage them to have faith in the people at the bottom of the pyramid. I believe strongly in our model's ability to tap into and empower the immense potential that is currently trapped in poverty. But I recognize that our volunteer team is not as well suited for large-scale implementation as our Rotary, Peace Corps, and others. Our goal is to keep growing until we can get on the radar of organizations that can take this model to the next level. In the meantime, our biggest challenge is funding. It doesn't cost much to establish one fully funded, sustainable loan pool, but with over 100 growing partners, the task sometimes seems daunting. As TCP Global continues its work, our belief is that those who are able to survive on less than $3 a day probably have a lot more to teach us than we have to teach them. We need to listen to them and trust them and support them. They mainly need resources, and we who have so much need to find a way to provide them with those resources. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions later on.
Helene, thank you very much. At this time, we want to turn to our second speaker, who is Rakesh Babuji. Rakesh is a Rotarian from Bangalore, India, but who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina in the US. And Rakesh, we'll turn it over to you now.
Oh, thanks, Carl. So thanks for this opportunity. So Gomati, could you please share the slides? And good evening to all in India and South Asia and East Asia, and I would say good afternoon and good evening to people from Africa, and good morning and good afternoon to people in the US. So today I'd like to speak about a few things, particularly showing a few success stories of what has happened in the past years in India, especially with regards to, I would say, microfinancing and various other sectors of lending, like peer-to-peer. And there are 3 success stories that literally come to light whenever we speak about this. And as most of you would know, the first is Amul, and then we have the Barefoot College, And then there's a new one, a new entry that has just come in over the last 2 decades, and that's called as Rangde. So I'd like to, speak a little more about these stories, and we'll have a lot of questions, I'm sure, and we can have those answered in the end of the session. So 1946, when India was uh, just free, we started off with a lot of small businesses. The whole situation was when people were running around trying to figure out how to set up industries. And that's when there was, I would say, a lot of chaos and a lot of unregulated businesses happening. So there were a few people who started exploiting that situation, and many of us at that time were struggling. So then came up a beautiful cooperative society which changed the whole dimension of, I would say, the dairy farming. And that's when Amul came into being. When all these things started, the women at that time who were, I would say, uh, the underserved communities were struggling, but this changed a lot in the way they could perceive and have esteem about themselves. If it's similar to what Helene just spoke, the transformation was tremendous. Next slide, please. So three things that, I mean, I spoke to you all about Amul and what it is also called as the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation Limited, as most of you all would know. So next slide, please. And so the three things that actually happened with this was economic empowerment. So economic empowerment started off when the middleman was completely removed, because the middleman the was the person who usually took milk from the farmers and gave it to the dairies. So whatever he or she, those days we didn't have the internet, we didn't have phones to receive messages, and we didn't have websites to post the day's price. So obviously, whatever the middleman dictated was the price. And so what the middleman did, he exploited the farmers, especially those days, farmers were mostly uneducated, who didn't know to read and write. And so they were totally dependent on moving that milk. Otherwise, it would not, you know, milk normally has a shelf life or kind of has a storage life. So it would not remain as milk if it's left beyond a particular point, especially with the temperatures there. So they were desperate. The moment they kind of drew the milk, they had to just move it off. Otherwise, they would be in loss. So then what happened? This guy knew their desperation and could feed on that and use them to give him how much ever he needed. So the profit was never there, or would be very slim. And therefore, when the cooperative society was uh, set up, the middleman disappeared. And farmers could now have a regulated uh, business. Farmers now could go directly to the dairy and deposit their milk. And slowly, what the dairy did was to educate the farmers on various things. They not only help the farmers with small loans and various other things, but they also help the farmers in managing their funds, in managing the area. In fact, Swachh Bharat started there when dairy farmers in Gujarat had to maintain their what do you say, maintain the hygiene of the cows and buffaloes that they had, and therefore the environment had to be set to a certain standard. And that is when they started uh, developing and having better work environments and better living environments. And this changed the whole scene of the Gujarat dairy farming. And that improved women lifestyle. It improved their self-esteem. And that's what is women empowerment here. Women started gaining roles in the never heard of administrative leadership bodies of their communities, of their villages, of their towns. Women could start sending now their children to better schools. Before, they were never going to schools, and now they could go to schools, and some who were going to schools could go to better schools. Women could speak up in the community and have various things happen. They could make decisions. People came to these women to discuss. In fact, there was a movie on this of how a woman struggled and changed the entire lifestyle of her family. So, and all this starts off with self-esteem. And that's what we see with women empowerment. And this dairy innovation didn't stop there. Women were also, it's not only women, but also some men, were also taught to make multiple or venture into other dairy products. Like, for example, uh, paneer, the cottage cheese that we so call in many other countries, that was developed. In some places, up to 1.8 times more income per square area. And in many places where uh, best practices were used, it went up to about 2.4 times the income of what normally was happening. This empowered women to go from, and it was not only about cottage cheese, they were also made to, or rather taught to make several other things which took them all to a different level. So when we come to economic development, this was an entirely new focus, and this stimulated the women empowerment scene in multiple places because the same thing was then replicated not only in the dairy farming and many other states and regions, but also in many other industries. If you look at NABARD's current farming schemes, it's much based on these best practices. So that's why AMUL stands so high. Please go to the next slide. The next example that I want to talk about would be the Barefoot College from Rajasthan. This started off in the year 1972, 1974, when Bunker Roy was around in Rajasthan, and he kind of saw the struggles of many of the rural areas, and the name Barefoot goes with that. So he saw, and he kind of made an assessment and realized that one of the main things that need to be done here was to bring in electricity. And that's when he started off with solar electricity, because he went to many government, uh, electricity distributors, and kind of realized those days there was no privatization. So he kind of realized that it was difficult, and there were a lot of bureaucratic uh, restrictions, because of which he didn't have any progress in what he attempted. So he thought of starting off by himself, and he got some help from various other sectors. And then after that, he started off training women, women who were uneducated, illiterate, women who came from very, very modest backgrounds from the village. He trained them with his group and transformed their lives. And how was that? By bringing in power, solar power into their villages. Villages that never had solar power, never had any, I mean, never even thought of using those things. But now these people started using these things, and they could, and it opened up a lot of other avenues of convenience and of prosperity. The kind of businesses that flourished there because of the electricity that was brought in changed the lives of many and their lifestyles. And then it was not there that they stopped. They went further, and he started training them on how to uh, purify water and how to identify pure water, water good enough for household usage and drinking. This, and again, who were the people he engaged in for this? The women. The women were taken through trainings, a series of trainings, and they changed the whole thing. And those villages and those communities prospered. And it didn't stop there again. They went to other countries in Africa. If you see barefoot uh, college.org, the link that you see here is the link for the Indian entity, that is Telonia. That's the place where it all started. But I would, for those in Africa, I would urge you to go to barefootcollege.org, and you'll find, uh, you know, you'll find a lot of initiatives and projects and success stories, and you'll find the transformation of people that Barefoot has brought in. So I urge you to go and visit these websites. And in the previous slide, I also put in Amul's website. Please go see there, and you'll see the multiple products that they introduced, and how these, and stories that you would also find of uh, success stories of people who have gone through these models and who have flourished. And all that needed to be done at that point was just to replicate a tried and tested method. And that is what these people did to the dot, and they came up with flying colors. So, having said this, the final uh, example that I wanted to give you all was on Rangde. Rangde, well, it's from my hometown or home city, Rangde, that is Bangalore. And in the year 2006, 2007, I guess, was when Ramakrishna and Smita Ramakrishna, a couple, decided to start this, uh, particularly inspired by uh, none other than Dr. Mohammad Yunus, uh, professor. I think 2006 was when he received his Nobel uh, award, and then was when these people, hearing his story, were inspired because they were following him, and they decided to start this. This is peer-to-peer lending, and this was just not for people to start an occupation, but for students to get into higher studies as well. And they have several. In fact, I'd like to tell you that uh, when I was back in those days, indulged in some farming activities. There were villages around our farm and from where we got our labor, and most of the villages did receive help from Rangde. These guys were so popular. It was a little beyond Kolar. That is a place called Mulbagal. Very close to that was where we had our farm, and many of the villages of there received help from these people. And to talk about a few stories, in fact, there was a guy who went on to do his engineering and get a job uh, in Infosys, being funded by these guys, Rangde. And that boy was a farmer's son who could not, uh, or who would not have otherwise afforded even high school education for his children. And he had a son who became an engineer and a daughter who became a nurse. Now, all these things were possible because of this. And these people were living, I would say, in a, a hut that was like 10 by 10, and their entire earnings before rumbling into their lives were not more than $1 a day. So with that, they had to manage everything else. That is food for themselves and food for their animals as well. But that kind of transformed their lives. So Rangde, it kind of has changed a lot for women in, I would say, in many states. It's just not here. There was a lady who kind of started off with tailoring work, and with their help, and then after that and then she started growing that particular business, and now that entire village, the women in that village are totally focused uh, into wanting to be entrepreneurs now with the help of these people in Orissa, that is Odisha right now. And I told you about an example of the education, and then after that, with regards to agriculture, in Maharashtra, there was this person who wanted to move from the usual, I would say, conventional practices of agriculture to organic, and then he needed a higher amount, which he was not uh, getting from many of the banks, which he went through NABARD and tried to connect, but he wasn't getting anything. So he reached out to these people. These people helped them, and in a few months, he was able to transform his land and get it certified for uh, growing organic crops, got the seeds and got the fertilizers, and had a great amount of increase. And through that, he has been able to now take more loans, or rather from them, and uh, buy more land and grow things at a huge scale. So it started off small, and now he's doing it at a huge scale. So all these things, you can do the next slide, please. So all these things show one thing in common. The first thing that was done, you see, if you look at the approaches, Amol, they kind of realized the thing that had to be done here was based on assessment, was to move the middlemen out and connect the dairy farmers with the dairy. In the second example, based on assessment, they kind of realized by bringing power to the village and by educating the women there in various uh, vocations, things would change. And that is what happened there. And in the third, they realized that farmers and many women farmers, especially, and many women around who are just not farmers, are good at doing what they do and are sharp at doing what they do. But if they are helped to scale up whatever they can, things would change. And that is why peer-to-peer lending started off. If you check their website, you'll realize that they have many options. They give you true stories. They're just like a crowdfunding website. Sometimes when you look at them, it kind of appears so. So it's the way they have structured themselves, and they give you options as Rotarians. They also give you options to directly choose who you want to fund. There are people who are there requesting for funds, and they've presented their requirements. You can choose to fund whoever you choose to fund. So that's what it is. So here, each one went with different approaches based on their, I would say, ground assessments, and that is what is required. And that's one of the aspects of what we do in Ragced. We do a needs assessment, and then we connect you with the people who can give you the solution. That's about for today. Thank you very much. See you all at the questionnaire.
Rakesh, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we'd like to turn it over to our third and final speaker, who is Biswajit Ghosh, who is in Calcutta, India. Biswajit is also serving as the chair of the Partnerships Committee of Ragced. Biz, please proceed.
Thank you, Carl, for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in today and encouraging Ragced with this initiative. Today, I'm going to talk about the journey of Professor Mohammad Yunus, who is deemed to be the father of microcredit. Now, we find that there's a lot of commonality between these three presentations, wherein, all of us have spoken about Professor Mohammad Yunus. Let me just play the... I hope my screen is visible now.
Yes.
Thanks, Roti. So I will probably go through quite a few slides talking about the evolution of microcredit and sort of the journey of Professor Mohammad Yunus. I'm personally very fortunate to be able to work with him as a senior Yunus Fellow for the last 2 years. And I have studied a lot of the models that he has worked on. And it's fascinating, like all of you who are here to learn about microcredit. I was also quite unaware initially, but it has been a great learning journey for me, and I wish to share a bit about it. Okay, so I mean, some of the aspects are familiar to most of us. Deemed the father of microcredit, Grameen Bank, he shot into limelight in 2006 through winning the Nobel Prize for supporting social development for the bottom of the pyramid. Incidentally, the only business company to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And he brought in some unique concepts, which over time has really taken roots across the world. So let's touch upon some of these points. Right. So starting off with what he deemed as a microcredit strategy. And this is something Professor Yunus always keeps talking about, that charity is not the answer. Somebody is in a difficult situation, is underprivileged because of circumstances, but given the opportunity, even the poorest person has endless potential. And this is something that he says, that humans are born entrepreneurs. Today we may be very much wanting to do a service job. That's the aspiration of the majority of people today. But say 300 years back or beyond, we have been traditionally entrepreneurs. So given the opportunity, and you give that opportunity to everybody, women, illiterate people, unemployed people, through a very simple concept of what he calls group lending system. Now, the reason banks don't provide credit to people, we all know, is because these people cannot afford collaterals, and they are also deemed to be risky investments. But through a group lending system and weekly installment payments, he has actually proved that the poor is very, very bankable. So some of the things that he has worked on, just a minute, I'll just move to the previous slide. So what he has realized, that when you lend in a group, so not only do you have good peer support, but it is also a very soft form of making sure that people actually repay back, because they are proud people and they want to also ensure that their peers and everybody else respect them for their ability to repay. And now this concept of group lending or solidarity lending is now popular in over 50 developing countries. The concepts are very simple. Create a 5-member group, very like-minded members, and people from more or less the same economic status. No guarantees required, though you are coming together as a group to take the money, and the repayment responsibility solely to the individual borrower. So that's the germination of Grameen Bank. It started in 1974, and honestly, for people who wants to learn about microcredit, they must read this book of his, which is a sort of a biography called Bankers for the Poor, and it very vividly explains how he finally chose to roll out microcredit as a support system when he saw immense famine and death and deprivation all around. And he started in this village called Jogura. I mean, this is now all history. And finally, it led to the concept of the Grameen Bank becoming an independent bank in 1983. So, to summarize, trade and financial services for the poor to improve their economic condition, lending exclusively to the rural poor, mainly women, no collateral, and based on mutual trust and accountability. Okay, so some statistics about Grameen Bank today. The largest rural finance institution in Bangladesh, over 2,500 branches in a small country like Bangladesh, 80,000 villages covered, that's over 94%. So great financial inclusion, getting banking services to those who never had access to such financial inclusion tools. 97% are women. I think by now the number of borrowers have reached 10 million, distributed over $33 billion. If you accumulate the journey for the last almost 50 years, loan recovery is hovering around 98%. This is the data as of 2022 beginning. And let's talk a couple of good examples about microcredit beyond the routine activity of actually lending money. So two interesting case studies I thought of highlighting. One is the village phone program. So when mobile phones started becoming popular, and it was extremely costly, particularly for countries like Bangladesh, it was quite out of reach. He created this concept of creating women entrepreneurs who will act as agents to connect people across the country and overseas. And they became business owners with a little bit of microfinancing done for the mobile phones that they took and provided that service. So over 50,000 phones, 80 million people supported through this unique activity with little bit of microfinance. It created so many entrepreneurs across Bangladesh. And the second part is absolutely bottom of the pyramid. They even have a unique program for beggars, which they call struggling member program. And this targets those who just don't have anything and have resorted to begging. And we know when you fund even people like this, they have seen that roughly 50% of the people have actually given up begging and got into some livelihood opportunities, which has ensured that they live a life with respect, and they've also come out of the the poverty line. So very flexible scheme for them, no interest, and they can decide as little as they want to pay and whatever long repayment cycle that they would like to have. Plus, they're covered through free life insurance. So these examples are very good applications of microfinance. And there's so many others that we keep hearing, including what Helene has shared, how microfinance can really impact lives of every segment of society. Moving on. So after he had such huge success around the Grameen Bank, he wanted to also ensure that this is scalable. This is something that every country can replicate. In many cases, we see examples of microfinance across the world in various shapes and forms, but he has been very particular about the format in which microfinance should happen, what he calls the model Grameen approach. And he has actually spread this concept through a build, operate, transfer model in numerous countries across the world, every continent. And he has also spawned a series of enterprises which also are focused on a particular area of work, where they do this work as social business, wherein in communications we talked about the mobile phones, in energy, renewable energy, really, in fisheries, in knitwear, in hosiery industry, which Bangladesh is so famous for. Everywhere he has sort of replicated. So this is about scalability, that, you know, with microfinance, you can actually start so many businesses where you also help in developing the industry for that country. And the other thing is, through Grameen Foundation and other organizations, he has shared this Grameen philosophy across the world, very particular about not having any profit motive. So all microfinance organizations that he has started would not declare dividends or take profits. And whatever is the additional income gets, put back into the business to grow it further. And they make sure that even the employees that work for these organizations get at market pay, etc. So let's talk a bit about what we have seen across with a few examples. So I talked about the BOD projects. We have seen its replication everywhere. And that gives the confidence that, you know, this is a model which can happen in every country. It is not about Bangladesh or one person who was so unique. He has demonstrated, and his team has demonstrated, to be honest, and he has a huge team. I think probably over 50,000 people work in various of these ventures in Bangladesh. And he has replicated it. And then you transfer it back to the local people, the local NGOs. So Afghanistan, Turkey, India, China, Yemen, South America, we have so many examples as well. US, a great story, Grameen America. Kosovo, a very good example of war-torn country, how it has been supported. Scotland was probably one area where it did not really take off, but good learnings as well. Zambia, Africa. So let's look at one example in each of these continents, how the Grameen model has been replicated from a microfinance perspective. So probably Grameen America is the more popular story, something which is even supported by Jennifer Lopez recently. She gave a huge grant to this organization to increase the scale and reach of Grameen America. Primarily, it is now present in 15 US cities, 23 branches, 123,000 members already, and a near 100% repayment. And it also shows that, you know, poverty is there in every country, even the developed countries, and everywhere, irrespective whether it's a developing or a underdeveloped or a developed country. If you give a little bit of funding and a bit of direction, bit of peer support, everybody can live a life of dignity and come out of the poverty trap. So that's America. An example of Myanmar. So here it was supported by UNDP, 13 branches, all women, repayment rate near 100%. Kosovo, wonderful example. Again, 100% women, 100% repayment rate, 4 branches. And in fact, some of our Grameen Trust colleagues recently, they traveled to Kosovo and they're talking about the amount of entrepreneurship that they have seen in a country which has been so devastated by war. The Zambia story, what is invariably seen that repayment is near 100%. Helene talked about her wonderful experiment in Uganda. Costa Rica, same here. In some cases, the numbers may be small, but it does reflect that it can be worked out everywhere. And the numbers don't matter because, if the proof of concept is established, more such organizations gets created. So you'll see a lot of these replication models started in the early 21st century when he didn't even get the Nobel Prize. But it was already a popular concept and it has grown in size and stature, and many other organizations have drawn inspiration from it. Now, I also want to talk to you about a very interesting experiment that he has done. It's a slightly different funding model. So while we saw through pure microfinance, the funding that was done in, say, Grameen phones and other such areas, what he has felt, and he's always ahead of his times, and this is a program he launched about 10 years back. What is very popular as startup culture and incubation today, and it's more for the larger projects and the more fancy technology based projects where most of the incubation is happening and probably supporting the middle class. He brought incubation for the bottom of the pyramid too. And that's this wonderful program called Nobin Entrepreneurship. Nobin in Bengali, my language, means new or young. So this is a program for the youth. When they're under despair, thinking what we'll do in our careers, well, look, run behind a job, will somebody employ me? He comes back to that concept that, humans are born entrepreneurs. They are destined to be job givers and not job seekers. And this program is a wonderful example. Let's talk a bit about it. So introduced about 11 years back. So 3 of his organizations, Grameen organizations, from the surplus that they get, remember, we talked about that, the businesses that he has set up does not take profits. So they plow back their profits, so-called profits, into such social initiatives to develop and incubate young and poor entrepreneurs. So this is the story of Nobin Entrepreneurship Program. And let's look at some of the stats around it. So if you see, this is early 2022, and I know now the figure has gone up to almost 130,000. So over 100,000 people through this unique experiment has become entrepreneurs. Their success rate is roughly around 90% plus, where their businesses have flourished. And this is beyond just microfinance, that's just funding. And if you see some of the numbers, they have a huge strength on the ground. So over 200 people are actively supporting the entrepreneurship journey. This is not about the loan recovery. That's a separate organization, which is Grameen Bank. Here we are talking about people who supports the entrepreneurs in the way they manage their business. And below the field officers, there's another 600 field staff. 54 districts of Bangladesh gets covered. And a good number, 1/3 of these entrepreneurs are women. They have created almost, for every 10 jobs, 9 jobs gets created. So that's the power of small funding, small microfinance, and incubation support and guidance. Often the fact that somebody is around to say, you'll get out of this, be a bit more disciplined, take such measures to make sure that your business is stable, does wonders. So how this model works, the funding that Grameen Trust or Grameen Telecom Trust provides is in the form of an equity. So it becomes an equal partnership at the beginning of the funding stage. The funder in this case will not take any profits. I mean here, the new entrepreneurs will keep on paying back the principal amount. So from a 50-50 partnership, as he keeps paying back, the ownership transfer gets increased. So slowly over time, the entrepreneur moves from a 50% partner to a 100% partner. There are cases where they fail, in which case that business stake is written off. But it gives them a sense of partnership, a sense of accountability, and a sense of data-driven approach. So the only money that is recovered is the support, this operation cost, which works out to be 20% of the overall loan amount. And only if the business, the new entrepreneur, is making profits will you pay that. So the investor will monitor, mentor, and guide, and the Nobin Udyokta, the new entrepreneur, has an opportunity to pay back over 3 years max, and he can decide. I mean, he may even do it within 1 year. The moment he finishes off his previous loan, he can get another loan to further enhance his business, increase the size and scale. And we have seen people going up to 7 times of new loan applications to keep on incrementally increasing his business. So that's the partnership model for you. And because they have great faith in the philosophy and the ethos and culture of the Grameen bank borrowers, because over years they have been nurtured in a particular philosophy. They feel the children of such Grameen bank borrowers would be supported through this program. So the age group 18 to 35, so this was the next generation. What was often seen is that the Grameen bank borrowers' children went to colleges and schools, they became educated, and then they failed to get into that entrepreneurship model of their parents because they became aspirational about a service job. And many people were jobless, and that's where this nice program stepped in. So have a dream, the organization will provide support to materialize and create jobs for others as well. So this is the initial criteria. I mean, over time, this can be scaled up further to engage a wider audience. Some experiments has also happened, but the network of Grameen bank borrowers itself is so huge that they could get almost 99% of the new entrepreneurs from that bracket. So just to summarize the whole methodology. So they undergo an screening exercise, which more looks at the attitude of the entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur has a business idea, great. A running business, great. If he does not, if he comes with an idea, that is screened. So that's the screening process that is talked about. Then the whole hand-holding journey, how you will be doing reporting, any regulatory aspects to be borne in mind, everything is explained so that the person understands what he's getting into. He's supposed to put forward a pitch, which is the social business design lab, as it is called, where the final selection happens. If their presentation and their thought process is not structured enough, remember, before they get into the design lab, they go through this process. So step 2 is where they have already learned what they need to do regarding setting up a business. If the presentation is not so good and they don't meet the criteria, they are asked to come back for the next design lab, which happens maybe every quarter. So it's not a lost opportunity, but a learning. And finally, the agreement which happens. Incidentally, there's a nice concept because, smartphones were not so popular 10 years back. They devised a very structured format of sending SMSs. So every day, it is expected that the Nobin Udyokta, the new entrepreneur, would send SMS updating his daily sales and his costs. And that gets fed into automatically into a specially designed software, which is kept at a central place at the Nobin Udyokta office. So that data gets populated. So they get MIS around how to sort of support if needed, if things are not going right. And of course, using money. Training of financial literacy is part of this journey. They do field visits, they meet, catch up with these entrepreneurs on a regular basis to make sure that, he gets the right model and guidance. So we talked about sending SMS regularly, and they also create a monthly receipt and a payment system for them. There's a regular way of paying back the investment. The ownership keeps increasing. As I said, the business partnership becomes more and more in favor of the entrepreneur over time as he pays back his investment. And generally, it has been seen for the majority of the cases that, the core asset that was brought into the business, both from the supporting body, the Grameen Trust organization, and the entrepreneur, it's seen that, progressively with a structured approach and discipline, the asset value also is increasing, employment gets generated, and it creates the right behaviors of a good entrepreneur. Just one or two case studies. So, a young girl got divorced with one child, comes back to his parental home and decides to study and supplement his income by catering, goat and poultry rearing. He buys a cow from the support given by Grameen Trust, starts earning daily. So TK is taka, 50 taka is roughly $half, sells meat, sells milk, takes more loans, sells the cow, use that asset to build further. So initially he had a local breed cow, he gets a foreign breed cow, the income boosts further. And 2014 she put her application and got an investment of 175,000 takas. Now a proud owner of 3 cows, 2 calves, 5 goats, and even does training on swing to local women, has 3 staff. So over time, what started off with 175,000 takas have come up to 620,000 takas, 2 years, and she's a successful entrepreneur. Another example from Kosovo. Merlinda started with 1 sewing machine, that took a loan, and we talked about 7 or 8 cycles of loan. So what she started off with 1,000 euros came up to 15,000 euros. She has 8 employees, 8 machines. Her monthly income has gone up 8 times, and now she's working to her dream with more loans from the Nobin Udyokta program. So just to add, Nobin Udyokta program, the new entrepreneurship program, has been replicated in Kosovo and Yemen, which is like absolute replication supported by Grameen Trust. There are still models of this in other countries, but these are where it's monitored by the Grameen Trust in Bangladesh. So another success story of a war-torn country supported by the UNIS ecosystem. So as I was talking about, we became labor because they stamped us that, that's what you are. We forgot that we are entrepreneurs. So if this mindset change happens, and it needs to happen to the youth of today because they become frustrated if they don't get the right jobs, then it leads to a far equitable world, a far happier world. So thank you for listening to me. Back to you, Carl.
Thank you, Biz. So we have time for some questions, and some have come in. First of all, Helene, if you could please try to contrast what TCP Global is doing with Grameen.
Okay, so first of all, I've read all of Muhammad Yunus's books and have distributed it widely to a lot of our microloan partners. So as you can see, Grameen is a much more robust organization. Ours is a very small organization run by volunteers. So we don't have the bandwidth to set up the kind of businesses they do or to even provide the kind of support in the field. So our program is primarily focused on just getting resources into the hands of small VSLA groups so that they can give out loans to their members, but we don't offer any kind of training. Many of our partners offer training. So we fill a slightly different niche than what they have. But I've followed Muhammad Yunus's teachings. He's been really inspiring and confirming when I was on the right path or maybe shifting me onto a better path, such as Muhammad Yunus recognizes that people not only need microloans, but they also need help when they have health issues. They need help getting permanent housing. So we try to work on those issues as well, but we're much smaller, so we have to be much more targeted and focused than they are.
Okay. Second question is you made a reference to a $118,000 grant from the Rotary Foundation. Can you provide any more details about that?
Okay, so maybe Chris, who is on the call, can provide more details. So Rotary does not approve grant funding for any of our kinds of microloan programs, as I explained, because we don't work through MFIs. But we've worked very closely with the people in Yumbe who received our loans, who then wanted to do more things. So Chris is a member of the EWASH cadre of the EWASH Rotarians and part of the cadre of expert WASH Rotarians. So he's been working with them to do all of these WASH programs, to bring in experts to help them drill the wells, provide access to the water filters. So this grant is for what our borrowers, once they're empowered, can do, but it's not directly related to microcredit. So Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. The grant addresses one of the causes of poverty, disease. As long as poor people have to pay medicines, stay in bed because they're sick, as long as they don't have energy to work, and it's hard to improve their condition. So what the grant does is it works with microcredit women to lead programs in their villages to get 100% latrine coverage in the village or sanitation, to get hygiene, hand washing services, to get water closer to the people and less time spent recovering water so that people can spend energy making money rather than going to the water well, waiting for water to be pumped and carried back. And it provides high quality water filters that totally stop diarrheal disease. We do pre and post tests of the benefits to the population, including increased income, decreased expenses. We hope it can be seen as a model, but it also addresses an additional cause of poverty, which has been referred to, which is the women's low self-esteem and low social position. And through the Rotary Club, they are seen now as leaders in their community, initiators in their community. Thank you. Any questions about that?
Well, thank you. Let's then switch back to Rakesh. A question about the Amul and the Rangdi case studies, and how might those be replicated elsewhere?
Well, number one, Rangde, we already have a few that Professor Yunus has started in countries. And we have something similar in the US as well. And so uh, for peer-to-peer, it's all about uh, having connects. And as Helene mentioned, uh, getting a global grant for this is not going to be possible. So we would need to have other global partners who can help us with this. The Rangde is kind of well connected with regards to the kind of partners it has. It has huge partners like the Tatas. They have the ICICI that's kind of working with them. So we have steady flow of, I would say, cash, which is most important, along with partners who go and help people in educating them, especially entrepreneurs, in how to handle financing. So you need to have multiple partners to be able to do this. That's how Rangde has been doing. If we have to replicate something similar, that's the model which needs to be used. When it comes to Amul again, that's already being used in many countries in Africa. They are having cooperative societies, and so that's not new. But here, there is a possibility of having a global grant, and at the same time, there is also a possibility of partnering with many countries and their governments to be able to set up these kind of things. Because in some countries, it's important that this particular model be regulated by the government. If they don't have government support, it kind of becomes impossible for uh, any kind of private entity to run this in Africa and in South America as well. So going to countries that are uh, predominantly democratic, it again becomes a challenge in some countries with the political conditions there. So it becomes difficult to comment on how this can be laid out. These were possible in India because of the support of the government. The government of those days were very supportive of these things. And even now, many replications are happening in other industries with the government that we have right now in India at these scales.
Yeah, thank you. Any final questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your different questions, and thank you also to our speakers. If you're interested in contacting anyone, we put up here their names and their email addresses, and please feel free to contact them directly for more information concerning what they've been doing. As a reminder, this was our fourth session. Our fifth and final session will be held on May 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time in the US and Canada. And we encourage you to register on the Ragced website to attend that. A recording of this has been made, and it should be available within probably 24 to 48 hours from this on YouTube. So please go back and look at that, and certainly feel free to share it with other people. And with that, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, in particular our three speakers, Helene Dudley and Rakesh Babuji and Biswajit Ghosh, for their time today. And thank you to everyone else for your participation. If you want to find more about Ragced, go to our website, ragced.org, or send email to us. Thank you very much, and we'll adjourn the meeting at this time.